But Chris, before talking about your writing, before talking about The Innocents, talk about your life outside of writing, what your career beforehand, and what sort of brought you to that stage.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing I did was I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I ended up joining the police up in Scotland.
Oh yeah,
Lothian Borders as it was then. It's Police Scotland now. That's now done away with all the regional forces, and it just encompasses the whole country.
Yeah.
I worked with them for a while, and then I went into private industry. Largely, there's a lot more money involved in it. Went into private industry. Had a very bad accident, which meant then I had to give up doing what I really enjoyed doing, and basically was forced into doing the jobs I'd always tried to avoid like the plague.
Yeah.
My first job after my accident was actually in a police control room. Very short-lived career because I was terrible at it. Somebody told me that a lot of ex-police, when they go into a police control room, are not good at it. They overanalyze all the cases instead of just passing them out. They take too much time over considering, well, if I get that more bit of information, they basically start investigating it, and they take far too long. So it's that didn't last long. So I went from there to a department which, well, basically the Tory government did away with it because it was related to the Home Office. And I managed a team where we gave information, legal advice and information, and sometimes we took cases for them, for members of the public on consumer law. I specialised in postal law and in energy companies, and that I loved doing that job. But as I say, that was one of the things that went with austerity, and I ended up latterly in another company, a large corporation, and I was managing their leasing team, which I hated. Yeah. So as soon as I could get my pension at 55, which was the age at which you could get your pension, I took my pension and started writing.
You mentioned a life-changing injury.
Yes.
Yeah, could you expand a little on that, and what happened to you? I had a similar situation many years ago, so I'm quite interested to know if you're okay with sharing.
Yeah, no, I'm fine talking about it. I think I don't think people talk about disability enough, to be honest. Yeah. It did leave me permanently disabled. I can't walk very far. I use a wheelchair for any distance, or certainly if there's any standing. What happened was I had a bad fall up in Scotland. I was visiting friends, I had a bad fall, took hours for the ambulance to get there, whatever. I damaged, I smashed my lower left leg, absolutely smashed it, and damaged my knee and my hips and my lower back and things. From there, they've rebuilt me over a series of years, but I'm still left with partial paralysis, and I think the worst bit's the nerve pain. It's the sole of my foot's hypersensitive, so even putting a sock on, every time I put my foot down, it's like lightning bolts through you. So that's I think what is the thing that's most disabling for me. But it made me sit down for, I think, the first time of my life, and stay at home for the first time in my life, and it was changing. It was absolutely changing. It took me in a course, because I fully expected just to keep doing what I was doing until I got to my pension age at 55. But as it was, I had to explore other talents and rebuild my career and things in an area which it wasn't really what I wanted to do. I think I still managed to do some good for people in the meantime, but writing is something I always wanted to do. Even when I was at school, I always wanted to be a writer, but as a working class kid, you didn't become a writer. That was something rich people did. You had to go out there and earn a living. So it's one of those things that just lurked in the background. Eventually, when I had the time and I had the wherewithal to do it, then I started writing.
So how long ago was it when you had your accident, Chris?
That was 2005.
Yeah, so 15, 16, well, it's getting up for 17 years ago now. Yeah. And did you quickly have to then become, or did you come disabled straight away, or did you try and recover and get back into things normally? And that, because that's a challenging time, isn't it? Sometimes when you're trying to think, your brain thinks, I'll get over this and recover, and it must be difficult to then accept that it's not going to be the way. That is, sometimes quite stressful. And
absolutely. When I was lying there initially, I knew that I wasn't going to work for some time. I knew it. I was lucky I had good sick pay and things like that. I was in an industry that gave that sort of thing. But even at that, even when I was lying there, I was thinking things like, well, it's going to affect my money and my income. So the first thing is, even though I was still lying there with my leg in bits, I was thinking, well, I'll take a mortgage holiday. That'll give me 6 months. I'm a very practical person, and you have to start thinking practically. But at that point, I always thought I was going to get better, because you see people with broken bones and you don't realize how bad they are. You think you break legs and things nowadays, you think they can fix everything, and they can fix it, but they can't necessarily make you right again, depending on how badly injured you are. And mine was pretty bad. We did have discussions about me losing the leg, but the surgeon persuaded me that the pain that I was getting, because it actually is occurring in the brain and not in the foot, that I would still have that pain anyway. The high probability that it wouldn't get rid of that pain. So I decided, after speaking to a lot of people, doing a lot of research, I decided I had to keep the leg. I mean, there's a chance I could have got rid of it and be more mobile with an artificial leg, but it's a judgment call.
Yeah, exactly. It's unknown.
My husband will kill me for telling you this, but when I'd done the counselling with the surgeon, and I know he meant it in the like nicest way, but the way he came out with it just made me howl with laughter. What he meant to say was, I'll love you, I'll be with you no matter what it looks like. Don't worry about losing the leg. But what he said was, don't worry about it. It doesn't look that nice anyway. And it just made me howl with laughter after I was in a quite tearful state. And I still think it's really funny, but he hates me telling people.
Well, at least you saw the funny side of it. I'm not too sure I would have done, but
well, you have to, don't you? But what you were saying though about those periods of readjustment, that it was this idea that I would be getting better and getting better. And every time I went into a surgery, I thought, this will be it. I'll work my way out of the wheelchair in this one, and then that'll be it. And then it took me, I think, a few years before I accepted that was never going to happen. I don't know how long it took you to accept that.
Yeah, it took a while. I was probably about 18 months or something like that, around about that sort of period, thinking, I'll be all right, I'll get over this. And then, I did start to improve at one point, but then the realization hits where actually I'm not, and things are just going to get worse. And of course, then you start getting a bit older, and natural things take the course then as well. And you don't recover as quickly, and things just, degenerate, just gradually get worse over time anyway, because you're naturally getting older. So it's a downhill battle in the end. The older you are, when you get a disability, I suppose it's a little harder to adapt to. It's not so bad when you're quite younger, I would imagine.
Because I think it can be hard at any age. Depends on whether or not you've had your mind fixed on one particular life that you were going to have, and if you're robbed at that's the hard thing to lose. And I certainly lost that, and I think a lot of people do. It took me longer than 18 months, largely because I was going through so many neck surgery, and grafting bone to me and all that. And I thought, after this one, I'll get better. Then eventually, there were no more operations left, and I still couldn't walk properly.
you always had a carrot there, didn't you? By another operation or this, there's a chance of that, and that's what spurred you
I was
on.
always chasing that rainbow, yeah.
Yeah. So,
but when I accepted it, I mean, those jobs, they looked to me at the time when I was doing them, they were only going to be temporary. I was going to get fit, and I was going to get back again, but that never happened. But then at that point, then I think it's a case of reappraising your life and thinking, well, I can't do that, but what can I do, and how can I do the most of what I can? With what I can do is making the most of it. It sounds to me like you've done a lot of that, because you're involved in organisations and trained in radio and all sorts of things. So you've certainly done that.
Yeah, and I think that's the way to go. And you found your writing. It seems to have worked from you by looking at your successful novels, which I know we want to push on to and talk about in some depth. So yeah, but you're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah, I think that was the best way. You've got to focus your mind and move on and take it from there. But yeah. But people, you're right. Again,
focus on what you've lost. You've got to focus on what you've still got.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Chris, can I ask, it may sound like a crude question, but do you think if you didn't have this life-changing injury, that you would have gone on to write these 6 novels to become a successful novelist?
I may have done it eventually.
Yeah.
I may have done it eventually, but it always seemed a bit of a pipe dream. And my work was far more encompassing when I was fit than it was when I was working in an office and doing 9 to 5. So for the first time in my life, I was able to go home of an evening and do hobbies and communicate with other writers and join clubs and things of that nature, which I may well have gone on ahead to do that, but it would have probably taken me a lot longer to get to that point after I retired. Whereas I could still work and start laying down the groundworks and just basically learning how to write, because I mean, I know some people can just sit down there and do it from the first page, but most people can't. It's a difficult thing, and people have to learn it. And I mean, my writing's changed a lot from the first book to the last. It was a big learning curve, but you do learn as you move on.
Yeah. So the Innocents, this series of 6 novels, you said, I've read that you based this on the film Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, the William Goldman Oscar-winning screenplay, Abigail, Nat and Jake.
Yeah, it's roughly based on that. When I first joined the police, our training sergeant was an older lady. She's dead now, actually, sadly, but she had great tales of the early policewomen, and she would tell the tales of the first policewomen that she knew that were old when she joined. So you're basically getting back to the Second World War and female policing at that time, and how they were more active during the war because there was a shortage of men, and the men came back, they more or less went back in the box and just dealt with certain types of things. But her stories were great. They were very funny and very interesting. But it did get me wondering who were the first female law enforcement that did the same job. I was the first generation that did exactly the same job as the men. We did the chefs, and we worked alongside the men, did exactly the same thing. I was the first generation that did that. I've got friends who were the first. The old police women's department, they were more or less 9 to 5, unless there was something specific happening, and they dealt with women and children. They didn't do the same job as the men. So I'd started investigating, and I found out that basically the Pinkertons Alan Pinkerton had employed women and people of colour on the same basis as everybody else. And he found women very, very useful for working undercover, because nobody expected women to be investigating, especially not in those days. They didn't even expect them largely to work unless they were servants.
Yeah, that's true.
They were very indiscreet around them. And I know the Pinkertons had a political element as well, but I stay away from that. These books are just crimes and whodunits, and there's one that's a howdunit, whereas you know he's a killer, but you don't know how he's killing. These books are based around the idea of the first female law enforcement. The other thing is that there are books about female Pinkertons that are out there, but they're largely a love interest or very much a sidekick to a male, where in reality, when you do the research, they weren't. They often worked alone, and if they were working with a man, they were very much as equals. So I wanted to reflect that, and I think my own experience has helped to inform that character in a way, and the type of women that do unusual things. And I've had a lovely comment from a reader who used to be a federal agent, and she said she's commented on how realistic the character is, because she's not always fluffy and nice and likable. She can be quite prickly and quite difficult at times, and that's what you have to do sometimes, I'm afraid, when you're doing difficult jobs.
Are they the Pinkerton? Are they the forerunners of the FBI or the local sheriff?
You know, the sheriffs, they did have sheriffs at the time, and I had to do a lot of investigation into American law, because the sheriffs are, because they're elected, they're a different element to the Pinkertons, and the sheriffs have a different type of authority to ordinary police, and I had to do all that investigation, which was really interesting.
How much work do you put into the research? But these are all set in 19th century, in the Americas, Wyoming, and there's an element of when they moved to Canada at one point in one of the novels. But all based in that geography.
And there's one book that takes place up practically all in San Francisco, and so there was a huge amount of research went into it, and trips to America. My work has taken me to America, and so I knew America quite well anyway. I've got lots of friends over there, but I had to set where the Pinkertons actually worked. And the Pinkertons didn't just work in America, they actually did go into Canada, and certain states in Canada were one of their biggest contracts, because they didn't have employed detectives in their police department, they just used the Pinkertons. So I tried to reflect everywhere that they went. It's not just a Western thing, but of course they're the big element of them working in places like that.
Okay.
So when did you decide to move from Scotland to Northampton? Was that anything to do with your book writing, or was that previous to?
That was work. No, that was work. Moving to Northampton was work. Yeah, it was. I was actually working.
Yeah, I just wondered whether it was
working in London. I actually worked in London, but travelled a lot before we moved to Northampton. But my husband was working in Northampton, so as opposed to commuting from Edinburgh to London, which is what I used to do, I commuted from Northampton to London, and then he worked locally.
Yeah, he went near Abington Park in Northampton.
I've been to Abington Park, Northampton, many times. Yeah.
I lived there for a couple of years. I used to take my dog for a walk there. I used to play golf for the nine course. Beautiful place. Yeah.
Yeah, I really liked it. There's lovely people and whatever. But now we're both retired. We both moved there for work. There was nothing to keep us here, and the eldest is moving. He's with a girl from York, so she wants to start a family in York. At the moment, they lived in London, so they're moving up to York to start a family. So we've moved up to York now to be around them. So
okay,
that's why I ended up in York, and I love it here. It's definitely been a good move. I love Yorkshire. Absolutely glorious place.
No, I just wonder whether it was purely for since you had your accident, or whether it was to do with your writing. But it makes perfect sense, actually. You moved to Northampton because of your husband's job. You're right in the middle in London there, and now you've settled in York. Yeah, well, brilliant. It's a lovely place, isn't it? Absolutely
I was,
gorgeous. Yeah.
Oh, it's a gorgeous place. But I was really lucky that when I went back to, they flew me back after I had my accident down to Northampton. But I had one of the leading, not just the country's leading, but one of the world's leading professors who is a specialist on legs and ankles, lower limbs and ankles, and Professor Ribbons. And he treats people flying from America, Olympic athletes fly in to get treated by him, and I got him on the NHS, so I was very, very lucky.
Wow. Yeah.
Just because I just happened to be in Northampton. That's where he was centred.
I also noticed that with your last book, Innocence to the Last, it just says Innocence to the Last, the sixth and final book in the series. Is that correct?
Yes.
You're going to go in a different direction from here then, and continue writing.
I've already started. Yeah, I've got the first one being pitched out to agents and things, which I'm still waiting for that. But basically, I'm not sure people are aware that the City of Glasgow Police are the oldest modern police force in the world. They're older than the Met by a long way. They had a detective department a quarter of a century before the Met did, and they were very keen in using innovative techniques and forensics and all that sort of stuff. So basically, I've had a look, and I can't find, there's lots of 19th century detective stuff set in Edinburgh, which I can understand because people go to Edinburgh and they can see the historic buildings, and it fires their imagination. You go to Glasgow, it was flattened in the war. It's largely all been rebuilt.
Yeah.
So to get the Gothic Victorian, there are still very, very Victorian places in Glasgow, but I've had to use maps and things to bring historic Glasgow back to life. So my new series is a new detective series set largely in around Glasgow, and a detective in the City of Glasgow Police.
Chris, whereabouts in Scotland were you from? Are you from Glasgow?
I'm not from Glasgow, no.
I'm just
I'm not from Glasgow. No, it's where am I from? This is a question I always hate because I lived like a gypsy a lot of my life. I was born in the Far East.
Oh, really?
I was born in the Far East, but then the longest I've lived anywhere is in England, but you wouldn't know that from listening to my accent.
No.
My dad moved around a lot for work. So yeah, I sort of grew up mostly, the place I live most in it is just outside Edinburgh. Okay. That's why I ended up joining the Borders Police.
Yeah.
So with the
no,
new
I'm not
books,
from Glasgow.
Right? Sorry. So with the new book then, or the new series, is it still going to be based Victorian times, or are you yes. coming up to modern police? Oh, you're still going to stick with the Victorian theme?
Yeah, still sticking with the Victorian. It's an era that fascinates me. It's the invention of modern times. It's where things they had science, but they also had the beliefs and the attitudes and the superstitions from the past. So I really like that juxtaposition between the two. And I like the fact that your detective can't just send something off to the lab. He has to work hard to get there. I really like that. And another thing that I enjoy is that I'm enjoying doing this is that Scottish law is different to English law, and historically I've not found that the quirks of Scottish law have been reflected enough in the books that I've read set in the 19th century. So I want to bring in some of those quirks. I mean, people in Scotland have been formally cautioned that the right to remain silent for centuries. People don't, even when I got this book back from the editor and he said, no, that sounds too modern. I said, I've done the research.
Sorry, no, I was just going to add, so there'll be no more Nat, Abby and Jake, and I haven't even started to read the series yet. I was just picked up on all the different books this morning, and they really excited me because it's the sort of thing I would easily get into reading, and I've definitely got to pick these up and have a look at them. So
Oh,
they'll be
thank you.
gone, and you'll be looking into some new characters, obviously. So sorry, Terry, carry on.
I was just going
All
to
right.
mention something very similar. You've got a great back catalogue, and you mentioned before that you're pitching your publisher, Prairie Rose. Are they pitching this to agents, to film companies? Have you got a Mr. and Mrs. Netflix knocking at the door?
No, they're very small. They're very small agents. They're a very small publishing company. And again, one of the problems, and I think every working class writer has this, is unless you come up through that university network, you can't get an agent. Yeah. I'd love to get an agent who could pitch these things. So many people have said this would make a great series, it would make a great movie, but getting out of the slush pile is really, really hard. I was lucky to get a publisher. I do have some publishers interested in this new series as well, but I want to try and get an agent first, mainly because they can do things like you just described. So if there are any agents out there looking for a disabled writer, disabled working class female writer.
Yes, I've often speaking to other authors from around where I live on the Wirral, and they often say it's a difficult step to take if you move into a different series or you go into a different theme, and you've got to find a new publisher potentially, or as you're saying, a new agent, and that is the big step that sometimes could throw you off and off kilter, and you have no publisher, and that's a scary bit, I suppose, isn't it? As well,
I have to be confident, say I'll get a publisher, because I'll work hard until I do. I'm a very determined person, so I'll do my best to get this published. But as I say, I've written the first one. I'm nearly finished the second one, and the first one is basically about a woman who's she's being pursued by people who are trying to kill her, and she doesn't know why. And they seem to have reached she's just a little ordinary woman. And she had no idea why all these powerful people are out to try and get her. And it's a lot of my crimes are based on real crimes, things that have really happened. But then I alter them and change them up. And then I'll take another true crime, a historic crime, and I'll change that up, because I don't want any of the true crime fanatics out there to be able to say, I know who done it, because I recognise that case, because I will change it up. So, but I think by doing that, I really root it in the period, but it puts new flesh on the old bones, so that even if you're a true crime fanatic, you can read it and get something different from it.
Excellent.
But is Amazon the best place? Sorry.
Amazon's the easiest place, but you can order them. You can order them at WH Smith or Waterston's or any of those places. These are all properly published books, and available in every country in the world. So if you ask for these books, at your local bookshop, your bookshop can order them in for you, and the publishers have also done them so that they can be ordered up by libraries. So if any of you want to go and order it up for your local library, then feel free to do so, because these books are available for libraries as well. That's part of the publishing deal.
Okay, that's great. Chris, I think time's running down on us. I'm getting messages from Zoom. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
That's been a quick 30 minutes so far, hasn't it?
It's flown.
Is that it? That's really fast.
Oh my word, that has gone really quickly, hasn't it? Yeah.
I thought, Chris, if it's okay with you, we could maybe chat again once you get this new series out and about there into the world.
I'd love to. I'm doing my best to get it out there. It's all very at an early stage. The first book's just been edited by a professional editor, so it's pitching time. So as soon as I can get that book available, I would love to chat to you again and tell your viewers and your listeners all about where they can find them and hopefully enjoy them.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Well, thanks very much, Chris.
Thank you. Lovely speaking to you all.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Lovely to meet you.
Take care. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.